According to the Department of Education, major college football is an over $2 billion a year industry. There's most of the stadiums can hold well over 100,000 fans, which dwarfs its NFL counterpart. The game's been played for well over 100 years. It's got a tradition that can be matched by no other American sport. Seemingly one of the oldest traditions that goes along with the sport is controversy surrounding who's the national champion. It's been going on forever. It's constantly changing, and with every change comes even more controversy. So much so that when asked if he could change one thing about the sporting world, Democratic electoral candidate, now President Barack Obama, said he would change the way college football selects the national championship. That's pretty big words from the leader of the free world. Why am I choosing this topic? Well, I'm a USC fan, hardcore USC fan. I'm a fan of college football in general, and there's no team really in the last 100 years there's very few teams that have been on par with USC as far as this national championship selection goes, especially in the last decade. I'm going to be giving you 3 main points today. Number 1, I'm going to give you a brief history of college football's championship selection process. Number 2, I'm going to give you the function of the current system, the BCS. And number 3, I'm going to go over some of the more major controversies that come along with this process. All right, first I'm going to go over the history. According to Dave Sabino, a writer for Sports Illustrated magazine, the first college football game was played on November 6, 1869 between the University of Princeton and the University of Rutgers. The first bowl game was played in 1902. It was designed as a side attraction to the Tournament of Roses parade. It's called the Rose Bowl today. That's why it's called the granddaddy of them all. The first national championship wasn't awarded until 1936 when a pool of AP writers awarded the Minnesota Golden Gophers the national championship. Now, because of this bowl tradition that had already been in place for 34 years before the first national championship was awarded, we never adopted a playoff. The polls were always preferred. Now, more polls came and went besides the AP poll, but there's really only 2 that are still around to this day that are really well respected. There's the AP poll, and then there's the coaches poll. And the coaches poll, basically they poll the coaches who they think the national champion is. Now, because of these are polls that are based on human opinion, and human opinion differs often, as you can tell. And so we had a lot of split national championships over the 100 years, which caused a lot of arguments, a lot of controversy. Who was the real champion? These teams often never met on the field, never even came close to meeting on the field, played at different ends of the country. And so they decided to get together and try to get a consensus going. The major conferences, the head of the major conferences, all that stuff. The BCS website chronicles its own inception as a lengthy process that took a majority of the 90s. Basically, there was many coalitions formed, coalitions and alliances and all that stuff, and they did a pretty decent job, but ultimately in 1997 they failed when Nebraska and Michigan split a national championship yet again. So and the following year is when the BCS was finally put into its current form. Now I'm going to give you a brief, simple explanation of how the BCS actually works. As you can see here, we have 3 main components into the BCS. We have the 2 different polls. We have the USA Today poll, which is the coaches poll. I know it's hard to read, bear with me a little bit. Basically, each portion of the BCS is divided into thirds, a third of the process. The coaches poll counts for a third, the Harris poll counts for a third, and the computers count for a third. The Harris poll is a relatively recent addition. It replaced the AP poll after the 2003 season. I'll get more to that later. And basically, the most complicated part is the computers here. There's 6 different computers. Each one has a different set of algorithms that include, strength of schedule, opponents. It gets ridiculous. It's by far the most controversial portion, and it's talked about all the time. Every year there's controversy, no matter what the situation is. Okay, now I'm going to get more into the controversy around BCS. Some more recent controversies. Okay, basically the process, as I said before, is complicated. It's not simple. With complication comes controversy. The biggest controversy I can remember, probably the biggest controversy in the entire system, was after the 2003 season. Basically, by its own standards, the BCS failed when it says we don't want to split national champions. When in 2003 USC and LSU split a national championship. And after this season, the AP poll specifically asked, we don't want to be part of the process anymore. And so they honored the BCS honored the AP poll request, took them out of the process, and replaced them with the Harris poll. The Harris poll is basically former players, coaches, experts in the game. Another major controversy was was chronicled by Austin Murphy, another writer for Sports Illustrated. Basically, Utah threatened the BCS with an antitrust lawsuit because several times Utah's finished during the BCS era with an undefeated record and didn't get a fair chance to play for the national title. This was really catalyzed after during the 2009 Sugar Bowl, when they went to play Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. And Alabama throughout the whole season was considered a favorite to play for the national championship, and Utah wasn't considered a real contender. Well, Utah put the beating on Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. Pretty bad. It was an embarrassing game. I watched it myself. Another major controversy is chronicled by Walter Alkin, a writer for the Hill newspaper. Basically, Obama isn't the only politician who voices displeasure with the BCS, and he didn't do it just one time. During his first year of his year in office, he mentioned 4 separate occasions on record in public that he's going to try to do something to change the system. And not only is he the only one, but House representatives from Texas, Hawaii, and New York all took major steps to draft bills to outright ban the BCS, not just voice their displeasure, but actually taking steps to ban the thing. Now I'm going to review the main points I went over with you today. I went over the history and how it's always been a controversy and it's always a controversial selection process. Then I went over the brief process of how it works, and then I went over some of the major controversies. Basically, with as much money and tradition that's on the line with college football, there's always going to be controversy until a more simple process is there. And hopefully you all now have a deeper appreciation of major college football and its championship selection process.